I've always prided myself on my routine. Life as an architect, at least for me, is built on structure. I wake up at 5:30 a.m. every day, the sound of my alarm pulling me out of the fog of sleep. By 6:30 a.m., I'm dressed in my suit, carefully prepared for the day ahead. Amanda, my wife, is usually still asleep when I leave for the office, her dark hair spread out on the pillow like a halo. We've been married for 5 years, and for most of that time, our lives have been in easy rhythm. Amanda works as a journalist for a local newspaper. We both share a love for our jobs, even though they keep us busy. She often works long hours, covering everything from local politics to community stories. I respect her dedication, admire her passion for her work. But it wasn't always like this. When we first met, we were inseparable. We shared everything, our dreams, our frustrations, our laughter. Those early days of our marriage were full of light, warmth, and a sense that we were in it together, no matter what life threw our way. But lately, something's changed. I can feel it, even though I'm not sure what exactly it is. Our mornings have stayed the same. We still share a quiet breakfast, Amanda sipping her coffee as I skim through the newspaper, our words few but comfortable. But recently, the evenings have felt different. She's been coming home later and later, sometimes long after I've already eaten dinner alone. It's strange because Amanda's never been one to work late for no reason. She's a perfectionist, but she's also disciplined. She would never let her work consume her to the point where it interfered with our time together. At first, I told myself that maybe she had a big story, something important that required her attention. I understand the demands of her job. But then the excuses started to pile up. I'm just finishing up an interview, she'd say, or I have to meet someone for a quick story. And each time she came home, she seemed more distracted, more distant. Her usual warmth was replaced by a kind of coldness that I couldn't ignore. I tried not to think too much about it. I convinced myself that I was being paranoid, that it was just stress or work-related pressure. But there were small things, little details that didn't quite add up. Amanda started guarding her phone with more care. She'd glance at it quickly and then put it down whenever I came into the room, as if she was hiding something. And then there were the weekends. Every Saturday, without fail, Amanda would leave early in the morning, telling me she was going to cover an event or an assignment for the paper. At first, I didn't question it. But then, after a few weeks of the same routine, I started to wonder if she was telling me the truth. It felt like she was slipping away from me, piece by piece. There was one weekend a few months ago when I decided to follow her. It wasn't something I was proud of, but the doubts in my mind had grown too loud to ignore. I waited until she left, telling me she had an early meeting with a source, and then I followed her car from a distance. She drove across town, and I couldn't help but notice that her route didn't make sense. She wasn't headed to the newspaper office, nor to any of the places she would typically visit for a story. She ended up in a quiet, upscale neighborhood in the Garden District. I told myself it was just a coincidence, that maybe there was a perfectly reasonable explanation. But deep down, I knew something wasn't right. When I saw her car parked outside an apartment building, a sense of dread washed over me. I sat there for a moment, trying to talk myself out of confronting her. But I couldn't. The questions, the doubts, they were too much. I got out of the car and approached the building. My heart pounded as I walked up to the door and knocked. The silence that followed felt like it lasted forever. When the door finally opened, I didn't know what to expect, but I certainly didn't expect to see Ethan standing there. He was tall, with short brown hair and a confident smile. He was wearing a button-down shirt, something that looked a bit too casual for a workday. Behind him, I saw Amanda. She was standing there, looking startled, her hand gripping the doorframe as if she didn't know whether to step forward or step back. Her face betrayed a mixture of shock and guilt. It didn't take much for me to put two and two together. Ethan was a colleague of Amanda's, someone I'd heard her mention a few times. But seeing him in that apartment, with Amanda standing behind him like she was caught in the act, told me everything I needed to know. I didn't say a word. I couldn't. My chest felt tight, my stomach turning. I turned and walked away, the sound of my footsteps echoing in the quiet street. I didn't care that she called after me, or that she tried to explain. I couldn't bring myself to listen. I was shattered, The life I thought I had, the life I thought we had, was nothing more than a lie. The following days felt like I was walking through a fog. Everything in my life had been shattered in an instant, and I wasn't sure where to begin picking up the pieces. I couldn't look at Amanda without feeling a deep, gnawing anger mixed with betrayal. She hadn't just lied to me, she'd built an entire web of lies around me. I didn't know what to do next. For the first time in our marriage, I felt completely lost. Amanda tried to talk to me, of course, but I couldn't bring myself to hear her explanations. Every word she spoke felt like another layer of deception. She insisted that Ethan was just a coworker, that nothing inappropriate had happened, but the look in her eyes told me everything. She was lying, and I was too devastated to even think about forgiveness. That night, I didn't go home. I found myself wandering the streets of New Orleans, a place I've always loved. The city's vibrant energy, the mix of cultures, the sounds of jazz drifting from hidden bars, it had always been a comforting background to my life. But now, it felt like the city was mocking me, like every corner I turned was another reminder of how I'd been fooled. By the time I returned to our apartment, Amanda was waiting for me, sitting on the couch, her eyes red from crying. I didn't even have the strength to face her. I just walked past her and straight to the bedroom, where I closed the door behind me. For days, I avoided speaking to her, avoiding the pain of having to confront the mess she'd created. She continued to apologize, but the words felt hollow. I wanted to be angry, to scream at her, to make her understand how much she'd hurt me, but I couldn't even summon the energy to do that. Instead, I just withdrew further into myself, shutting out the world as best I could. One night, she tried again. She came into the bedroom and sat on the edge of the bed, her voice trembling as she begged for my forgiveness. She promised that it wasn't what it seemed, that she had only gotten too close to Ethan because of work, that nothing physical had happened between them. But I couldn't believe her anymore. The trust had been broken, and I couldn't ignore that gut feeling that had been gnawing at me. "You don't understand, Michael," she said, her voice pleading. "I made a mistake, a huge mistake, but I need you to believe me when I say I never meant to hurt you." I looked at her for a long moment, seeing her in a way I'd never seen before. The woman I had married, the woman I thought I knew, was no longer there. She had become someone else, someone I wasn't sure I could recognize. "I don't know who you are anymore," I whispered. The words felt like a weight in my chest. Amanda's eyes welled up with tears, but I couldn't bring myself to console her. I couldn't be the man she needed. Not anymore. The next morning, I went to the office. My head was a blur of confusion, but I threw myself into my work. It was the only thing that gave me some sense of purpose in the midst of all the chaos. But even then, the quiet moments between tasks, the calm in the office, were reminders of what was waiting for me at home, the broken pieces of a life I no longer recognized. I spent the next few weeks in a state of numbness. I didn't know if I was angry or heartbroken or simply exhausted by it all. All I knew was that I couldn't continue living like this. The trust was gone, and so was any sense of peace I'd once had. One morning, as I was getting ready for work, I heard Amanda's voice from the living room. She sounded tired, almost defeated. "Michael, I know I've hurt you, and I don't deserve your forgiveness," she said. "But I need to ask you one thing. Please let me try to fix this. Let me prove to you that I can be the woman you thought I was." But I had already made up my mind. I couldn't live in this lie anymore. Later that day, I filed for divorce. It wasn't something I ever thought I'd do, but it was the only way to escape the web of deceit she had spun around us. The days that followed were a blur of legal paperwork, phone calls with lawyers, and endless discussions about the next steps. Amanda had moved out by then, but the silence in our apartment was deafening. The place that had once felt like home now seemed like a cold, unfamiliar space. I found myself walking through the rooms, not knowing what to do with myself. The divorce was inevitable, but that didn't make it any easier. Every time I thought about it, I felt like I was losing more than just my wife. I was losing the life I had built, the future I had imagined. I had always been the kind of person who thrived on stability. My job, my marriage, my routine, they were the foundation of everything I knew. But now, all of it was crumbling beneath me. Amanda took the news hard. She had always been the one who was in control, the one with a plan, but now she was unraveling. I could see it in her eyes every time we spoke. Her world was collapsing, and she knew it was her own fault. She tried to justify herself, tried to convince me that I was making a mistake, but it was too late. The damage had been done. Her work at the newspaper had become untenable. I heard through mutual friends that she had been let go, that her reputation had been tarnished beyond repair. I didn't want to take pleasure in her misery, but a part of me couldn't help but feel vindicated. She had betrayed me, and now she was paying the price. I moved into a smaller apartment on the outskirts of the city, a place that felt more in line with the life I was now living. Simpler, quieter. It wasn't much, but it was mine. It didn't come with the memories of what we had shared, and that was exactly what I needed. I focused all my energy on work, trying to block out the constant ache in my chest. I kept telling myself that I was better off without her, that this was the only way forward. But there were moments, late at night, when I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, when I questioned everything. Had I made the right decision? Was there a chance that we could have worked through it, that I could have forgiven her? But the answer was always the same. I couldn't trust her again. The woman I had loved was gone. In her place was someone else, someone I didn't know. The weeks turned into months, and I began to rebuild. I threw myself into my career, focusing on projects that challenged me, that pushed me to grow. I spent more time with friends, reconnected with people I had neglected over the years. There were moments of joy, even laughter, and for the first time in a long while, I began to feel a sense of peace. But even then, there were still those fleeting moments when I thought about Amanda. I wondered where she was, what she was doing, how she was coping with the fallout of our marriage. The woman I had once shared everything with had disappeared, leaving only the ghost of what we had been. I remember one afternoon, about 6 months after the divorce, I ran into a friend of mine, Peter, at a cafe. He was sitting alone, sipping his coffee, and when he saw me, he waved me over. We exchanged pleasantries, catching up on work and life, but then, out of nowhere, he mentioned Amanda. I heard about what happened, Peter said, looking down at his cup. It's been hard on her, you know. She's really been struggling to put things back together. I didn't say anything at first. I didn't want to seem cold, but the truth was, I wasn't sure how to respond. I had been so focused on my own healing that I hadn't stopped to consider what Amanda was going through. The thought of her being alone, without the life we had shared, didn't make me feel better. It didn't bring me satisfaction. It only reminded me of how much I had lost, too. She's living by herself now, Peter continued. No job, no friends. It's like she's lost everything. I nodded slowly, unsure of what to say. I didn't know if Amanda had changed, if she had learned anything from what happened, or if she was still the same person who had broken my heart. As we finished our coffee, Peter stood up to leave, but he paused and looked at me one last time. I know you're better off now, Michael. I just hope she figures things out too, he said before walking out of the cafe. I sat there for a while after he left, thinking about Amanda, about the woman I had loved and lost. I wasn't sure what the future held, or if there was any possibility of forgiveness between us. All I knew was that I had to keep moving forward, one step at a time, even if the road ahead was uncertain. Months passed, and as time wore on, I found myself adjusting to this new life. It wasn't easy, change never is, but somehow, I was learning how to navigate it. The pain of my marriage's collapse hadn't disappeared, but it had softened, like a bruise that fades with time. I focused on my work, on making a name for myself in a world that had once felt so familiar and now seemed distant, almost foreign. I settled into my new apartment, a simple place in the suburbs of New Orleans. It was nothing fancy, but it was mine. No more shared walls or memories of arguments and tears. Just me, my sketch pads, and the quiet hum of the city outside. I spent evenings walking through the nearby parks, getting to know the streets that no longer held any reminders of her. It was during one of those walks that I ran into someone new. Her name was Sarah, and she worked as a photographer for a local magazine. We met at a small cafe where I often went to unwind, and the conversation came naturally, as if we'd known each other for years. She had an easy smile and an infectious laugh, and for the first time in months, I felt something stir inside me, a flicker of hope. We started seeing each other casually, grabbing coffee, talking about art, about life, about the things we loved. It wasn't love, not yet. But it was something I hadn't felt in a long time, connection. She was different from Amanda in so many ways, and for that reason, I found myself more drawn to her than I had expected. Sarah didn't know the details of my past. I didn't talk about Amanda or the mess of my marriage. It was something I had put behind me, something I wasn't ready to revisit. With Sarah, I could just be myself, someone who wasn't carrying the weight of betrayal on his shoulders. She had her own baggage, of course, everyone does, but we didn't dwell on it. We were two people, trying to find some light in the aftermath of our lives. One evening, after a few months of seeing each other, we went for a walk along the riverbank. The sun was setting, casting a golden glow over the water, and I could feel a sense of calm settling over me. It was the kind of evening that reminded me why I loved New Orleans. The city's beauty, its life, its pulse. As we walked, Sarah stopped suddenly, looking out over the water. There was a quiet moment, then she turned to me. "You know, Michael," she said, her voice soft, "I think you're one of the most genuine people I've met in a long time." I wasn't sure how to respond. The words caught in my throat. I had spent so much time building walls around myself, keeping everyone at arm's length. I wasn't used to hearing someone say something so kind, so real. I had always been the guarded one, but Sarah's words hit me in a way I didn't expect. "I've had my share of things to get over," I said after a pause. "But I'm trying to move forward. It's not easy, but I'm getting there." She smiled at me, and in that moment, I realized that I had come so far. I was no longer the man broken by betrayal. I was someone new, someone who had learned to rise from the ashes, not just survive but live again. The road to healing hadn't been linear. It hadn't been a straight path from pain to peace. But I was learning that sometimes the only way forward was to let go of the past, to stop dragging the weight of old wounds behind you. And as I stood there, looking out at the river with Sarah by my side, I realized that the future was wide open. Amanda's shadow no longer loomed over me. The life I had once known was gone, but that didn't mean there was no room for something better, something real. I didn't know what that something would look like yet, but for the first time in a long time, I was ready to find out.